My name is Evelyn Hart. I am 23 years old now, but the first time my family decided my worth, I was only 3. I was too young to understand why my mother would not look me in the eyes, why my father kept saying, a son would have carried the name, or why my small clothes were folded into a plastic bag like I was something being returned. For years, everyone in my birth family believed I had been given away because I was unwanted. But what nobody knew was that the woman who raised me had kept one envelope for 20 years. And the night my parents asked me for $40,000 to fund the future of the son they chose over me, I opened that envelope at the dinner table, and the room went so quiet, even my father stopped breathing normally. If you believe calm truth can be stronger than loud cruelty, please subscribe and stay with this story, because the ending is not about revenge. It is about dignity finally finding its voice. I grew up knowing I had been given away. Not in a dramatic way. Not through one terrible moment that broke everything at once. It was quieter than that. It lived in small silences. In missing baby photos. In the way adults lowered their voices when I entered a room. In the way my adoptive mother, Ruth Hart, would touch my hair and say, "You were not thrown away, Evelyn. You were placed where love could find you." I wanted to believe her. Most days, I did. Ruth was not rich. She worked as a records clerk at a county office and wore the same navy coat for 11 winters. Our house had creaky floors, second-hand curtains, and a kitchen table with one leg slightly shorter than the others. But it was warm. It was honest. It was safe. She taught me how to read before kindergarten. She packed notes in my lunchbox. She stayed up with me during storms because I was afraid of thunder. She never once called me a burden. But children hear more than adults think. When I was 7, I overheard a neighbor ask her, "Do her real parents ever call?" Ruth answered gently, "I am her real parent." That sentence stayed with me longer than any birthday gift. Still, there was another family somewhere. A family with my blood. A mother whose face I had inherited. A father whose last name was once supposed to be mine. And somewhere, there was a boy. Their son. The child they kept. His name was Caleb. I first saw him when I was 12. Ruth had taken me to the grocery store. I was choosing apples when she suddenly went still. Across the produce section stood a woman with sharp cheekbones and nervous hands. Beside her was a boy about 9 years old wearing clean sneakers and a baseball jacket. The woman saw me. For 1 second, her face changed. Not love. Not regret. Something closer to discomfort. Then she turned away. Ruth placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Come on, sweetheart." That night, I asked, "Was that her?" Ruth did not lie. "Yes." "Was that my brother?" She nodded. I remember sitting on my bed afterward, staring at my hands, wondering how a mother could recognize her daughter and still choose the cereal aisle. If you have ever felt unseen by the people who should have protected you, comment I stayed standing. Someone reading it may need to know they are not alone. As I got older, pieces of the story came out slowly. My birth parents were Daniel and Marissa Vale. They had struggled financially when I was born. My father came from a traditional family where sons mattered more than daughters. My mother had been tired, pressured, and ashamed. When I was 3, they arranged for Ruth, who had once been a distant family acquaintance, to take me permanently. People softened it with words like private adoption and better opportunity. But Ruth never used pretty words to cover ugly choices. "They were wrong," she once said while washing dishes. "But you do not have to spend your life proving you should have been kept." I tried not to. I studied hard. I worked part-time at a bookstore. I earned scholarships. I learned accounting because numbers felt safer than people. Numbers did not change their story. Numbers did not call you unwanted and then ask you to smile for family photos. By 23, I had a steady job at a small financial firm. Nothing glamorous. I wore simple blouses, took the bus, saved carefully, and came home most evenings to Ruth's old house, which had become mine after she passed away. Ruth died 8 months before the dinner. Losing her felt like losing the only witness to my life. At her funeral, Daniel and Marissa did not come. I did not expect them to. But 3 months later, Marissa called. Her voice was soft, almost rehearsed. "Evelyn, it's your mother." I closed my eyes. Ruth had taught me not to answer cruelty with cruelty, so I said, "Hello, Marissa." There was a pause. Then she said, "We should talk. It has been too long. Too long." As if time had accidentally separated us. As if I had wandered off in a mall. She invited me to dinner at a nice restaurant downtown. She said Caleb would be there. She said my father wanted healing. I almost said no. Then I remembered the envelope. Ruth had given it to me 2 years before she died, when she first got sick. She had placed it in my hands and said, "Do not open this because you are angry. Open it when someone asks you to forget your worth." I had kept it in my desk drawer ever since. Unopened. On the night of the dinner, I put it in my purse. I told myself I probably would not need it. But some part of me already knew. The restaurant had white tablecloths and soft gold lighting. My birth family had chosen a private room, but the doors were open enough that nearby tables could hear raised voices. There were cousins I barely remembered, an aunt who looked at me like a rumor, and Caleb sitting at the center of everything in a gray suit. He was 20 now. He looked nervous, not cruel. That mattered. Marissa hugged me too tightly and said, "Look at you. So grown." Daniel shook my hand. My father shook my hand. That was the first humiliation of the night, though nobody else noticed. Dinner began politely. They asked about my job. They asked about Ruth with the careful tone people use when they want to sound respectful without feeling responsible. Then Daniel cleared his throat. "Evelyn, we asked you here because family should support family." I already felt the room changing. Marissa looked down at her plate. Caleb shifted in his chair. Daniel continued, "Caleb has been accepted into a business program. It's an excellent opportunity. But tuition and housing will cost more than expected." I waited. He smiled as if presenting a reasonable invoice. "We need $40,000. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood. Then my aunt said, "You don't have children. You have a good job. And Ruth left you that house, didn't she?" There it was. Not reunion. Not remorse. A calculation. I looked at Caleb. His face had turned red. "I didn't know they were going to ask like this," he said quietly. Daniel frowned. "Don't apologize for needing help." Then he turned back to me. "We gave you a better life. Ruth could not have taken you if we had not allowed it. Now it is time to give back. Give back. For being given away. For surviving. For becoming useful." My hands were steady, but inside, something very old began to ache. Marissa finally spoke. "We are not asking for ourselves. We are asking for your brother's future." I said, "And what was I?" She blinked. "What? When I was 3. What was I?" Nobody answered. Daniel's jaw tightened. "This is not the time to be dramatic." I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because people who create wounds are often the first to call pain dramatic. That was when my aunt leaned forward and said, "Evelyn, don't be difficult. Your parents made a hard choice. And honestly, you turned out fine. You turned out fine." Those 4 words can erase 20 years if you let them. I reached into my purse. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, sealed with Ruth's careful handwriting on the front. "For Evelyn, when they ask you to forget." The table went quiet. Daniel stared at it. "What is that?" I said, "Something Ruth gave me." Marissa's face changed again. The same look from the grocery store. Discomfort. Fear. Recognition. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside were copies of legal documents, a letter from Ruth, and one photograph I had never seen. The photograph showed me at 3 years old, standing beside Ruth's kitchen table, holding a stuffed rabbit. On the back, Ruth had written, "The first night she slept peacefully." My throat tightened, but I kept reading. Ruth's letter began simply. "My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, someone has tried to turn your abandonment into a debt." I had to stop. Not because I was weak. Because truth, when it arrives after years of silence, deserves a breath. Please subscribe if you are still here, because this is where the story changes, not loudly, not cruelly, but completely. Ruth's letter explained what she had never fully told me. Daniel and Marissa had not simply given me away. They had signed a notarized relinquishment agreement. In exchange, Ruth had assumed all responsibility for me, including medical care, school costs, housing, and legal guardianship. There was no ongoing contact required. No support from them. No future claim. But there was more. Ruth had also kept records of every conversation around that time. Not recordings. Not secret traps. Written notes. Dates. Witness names. Copies of letters. Because Ruth worked with records. She believed paper remembered what people denied. One document was a letter from Daniel himself, written 20 years earlier. I read only one part aloud. "We are choosing to place Evelyn permanently with Ruth Hart because we cannot provide for a daughter and must focus our resources on building a future for our son when he comes." Nobody moved. Caleb looked like someone had taken the floor from under him. Daniel said, "That was taken out of context." I placed the paper on the table. "It is your handwriting." Marissa whispered, "Evelyn." I looked at her then. Really looked. She was not a monster. That almost made it harder. She was a woman who had made a cruel choice and spent 20 years hoping the child would stay quiet enough to keep the story comfortable. Ruth's envelope also contained bank records. When I was 3, my maternal grandmother Marissa's mother had left a small education trust in my name. Not millions. Not a miracle. Just enough to help a child begin life with dignity. Daniel and Marissa had tried to access it after giving me away. They failed because Ruth had challenged it legally. That was the hidden advantage. Not wealth. Protection. A woman with a modest salary and an iron spine had stood between me and the people who had already decided I was disposable. The trust had matured when I turned 21. Ruth had told me about it then, but not the whole history. She had only said, "This money was always yours." I had used part of it for school and saved the rest. The amount left was close to $40,000. Exactly what they were asking for. Daniel's face had gone pale. "You have that money?" he asked. There it was again. Not "I am sorry." Not "we hurt you." Just the number. I folded Ruth's letter carefully. Yes, I said. I have it. Marissa's eyes filled with tears. Then you can help your brother. Caleb stood suddenly. Stop. Everyone looked at him. He was shaking. I didn't know, he said. I didn't know any of this. Daniel snapped, sit down. But Caleb did not sit. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, someone from that family looked at me without trying to reduce me. I am sorry, he said. I know that doesn't fix anything. But I'm sorry. That apology did not heal 20 years. But it mattered because it cost him something. Daniel pushed back his chair. This is manipulation. Ruth poisoned you against us. I felt something in me go very still. I did not raise my voice. Ruth fed me. Ruth held me through fevers. Ruth signed school forms. Ruth taught me how to drive in an empty parking lot. Ruth sat in the front row when I graduated. Ruth did not poison me against you, Daniel. She protected me from needing you. The room was silent. Not shocked silence. Witness silence. The kind that forms when people know they are seeing something that cannot be unseen. My aunt muttered, this should have been private. I looked around the table. You invited me here publicly. You asked me for money in front of everyone. You called abandonment a favor in front of witnesses. So I am answering in the same room. Then I turned to Caleb. I will not give $40,000 to the people who gave me away and called it generosity. His face lowered. But, I continued, I will send you the contact information for scholarship offices, grant programs, and the financial advisor who helped me. If you want to build your future honestly, I will give you information. Not money. Not guilt. Information. Daniel laughed bitterly. So you punish him for our choices? No, I said. I am refusing to let your choices become my responsibility. That was the sentence that ended the dinner. Not because it was dramatic. Because it was true. Marissa began crying quietly. Daniel blamed Ruth. My aunt blamed the atmosphere. Someone said I had embarrassed the family. But Caleb did something nobody expected. He picked up his coat and said, I'm leaving. Daniel stared. Excuse me? Caleb looked at him. You told me Evelyn was adopted because Ruth begged for a child. You told me it was kind. You never told me you gave her away because she was a girl. Marissa covered her mouth. Daniel said, we did what we had to do. Caleb shook his head. No. You did what made you comfortable. Then he turned to me. I don't deserve your help. But if you really will send those contacts, I'll use them. I will, I said. And I did. The next morning. Because fairness matters most when you have every reason to be unfair. If this story is touching something real in you, comment fairness over revenge. That is the heart of calm justice. The aftermath was not simple. People like endings where everyone apologizes and the wounded person is suddenly surrounded by love. Real life is slower. Daniel did not apologize. He sent one long message accusing me of humiliating him. I did not respond. Marissa called twice, crying. I answered the second call. She said, I thought about you every birthday. I said, thinking about a child is not the same as showing up for her. She cried harder. I did not comfort her. That was new for me. For many years, I had carried other people's discomfort like it was my job. Ruth used to tell me, Evelyn, compassion does not require self-erasure. I finally understood. Caleb emailed me 3 days later. His message was short. Evelyn, thank you for the resources. I applied for 2 grants today. I also moved out of the house. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know I am sorry for benefiting from a story that erased you. I read that email several times. Then I replied. Caleb, you were a child too. What matters now is what you do with the truth. Months passed. I started therapy again. Not because I was broken, but because some pain needs a place where it can speak without being judged. I learned that being unwanted by someone does not make you unwanted in life. I learned that a boundary can be spoken softly and still be immovable. I learned that sometimes the person who saves you does not arrive with wealth or power. Sometimes she arrives in a worn navy coat, with a lunchbox note, a stack of documents, and enough love to build a life from what others abandoned. 1 year after the dinner, I opened Ruth's envelope again. This time, I did not shake. I placed the photograph of 3-year-old me in a frame and put it on my desk. Not to remember being given away. To remember being received. Caleb and I speak occasionally now. Not like siblings who grew up together. We did not earn that history. But there is honesty. There is respect. There is a small bridge where a wall used to be. Marissa writes letters. I read some of them. Not all. Daniel remains convinced he was wronged. That is his burden to carry. Mine is lighter now. The $40,000 stayed in my account for a while. Then I used part of it to start a small scholarship fund through the community college Ruth loved. It is for young women who were told they were less valuable than someone else. The first recipient wrote me a thank you note. She said, I didn't think anyone saw me. I sat at my kitchen table and cried. Because Ruth was still doing it. Still seeing people. Still protecting futures. Still turning quiet love into proof. And if there is one thing I would tell anyone who has been treated like a backup plan, a burden, or a debt waiting to be collected, it is this. You are not required to repay people for surviving what they failed to give you. You can be kind without being available. You can forgive without reopening the door. You can understand someone's weakness without funding the consequences of their choices. And when the moment comes when they sit across from you and ask you to forget your worth, may you have your own envelope. Maybe it is not paper. Maybe it is memory. Maybe it is truth. Maybe it is the quiet voice of one person who loved you correctly. Open it. Read it slowly. And remember who you were before they tried to rename your pain as obligation. My parents gave me away because I was a girl. 20 years later, they asked me to fund the son they chose. I did not punish them. I did not scream. I did not ruin anyone. I opened one envelope at the table. And for the first time, the truth did not ask permission to be heard. Please subscribe for more calm justice stories, and comment where you are watching from. Sometimes one quiet story reaches the exact person who needs it tonight.